Well, welcome to the Band of Brothers broadcast. I'm here this afternoon, barely afternoon, with Mike Webster. How you doing, Mike?
Good. Thanks for having me, H.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being willing to share your story with a lot of people. A lot of this will go to the Band of Brothers, but hopefully it'll reach out farther than that, and you can have an impact on a bunch of people all around the country, maybe all around the world. We'll see.
Beautiful.
So anyway, well, thanks again, bud. I appreciate it. And let's just start at the beginning. Like, what was the first time you ever took a mind altering substance? How old were you?
Yeah. So the first time I would say I was about 12. Um, and it was alcohol. And I remember so at this point in time, my father owned a gas station in Montana.
Okay. Where in
I
Montana?
In this little town called Fishtail. It's about an hour from Billings.
Okay.
Um, I I would go and I would steal alcohol from my dad's gas station, and then I would wait until everybody went to sleep, and then I would drink, and I think at this point in time I was trying to I was trying to see what it was like, right? Like I at that young, I don't think I quite understood what I was doing, but it was I wanted to see what the adults were talking about. Why was alcohol attractive? Why,
Yeah.
how does it feel? And so that's the first time that I
How old
tried
were you?
mind altering. I was 12 years old. So
So, what did it feel like? Do you remember the feeling you got?
yeah, so I do. The feeling that I got then was a feeling of, well, so the feeling I got then, I don't believe really hit me like hook, line, and sinker, like like the drugs did, is when the drugs entered my life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember feeling, like dizzy and kind of light on my feet, and more like maybe more alive, I guess, if that's fair to say. But it quickly came and went, right? So at that age, it wasn't like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm hooked on this, I love this is what I'm gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
um but it
Did
but
it did it fill up a hole? Like, did it help with? Did you have anxiety or depression, or as a 12? I mean,
um
did you feel that kind of stuff when you were that age?
so at that age, no. At that age it was purely um experimenting,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to try something that I seen other people doing, like in that case, um, adults around me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at that point, I wasn't. At that point, I can honestly say I wasn't trying to fill a void or alter how I already felt.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I do believe, however, that it cracked the door open for, as I got later into life, um, it made transitioning into other things much easier, I believe.
Why do you think that?
I think because once I once I had tried something that now I know, or now I knew could change how I felt. um, it's almost like it fired that in my brain, right? And so as I got later in life, and now I did feel voids, and I did feel feelings of fear and anxiety, and wanting to be accepted. It was like, oh, hey, there is something that
Mm-hmm.
can alter your feelings and change emotion and manufacture feelings of happiness and acceptance. And it's almost like it's almost like that stuff happens subconsciously for me, because I believe that when I like, for instance, when I look back on my childhood, I had addict behavior as a child long before the drugs and the alcohol, right? So like I wasn't just happy with one Ninja Turtle, right? I wanted them all. I wasn't just happy with one candy bar. I wanted 7. And it was that was my mentality. And I would act out if I didn't get those things. And it was constantly trying to feel different than I did, right? And so and it took me a long time to kind of connect those dots. You know, I'll be 39 this year, and I can honestly say that for the first time in my life, that stuff is starting to make sense, you know. And so yeah.
So when did you do it again, or when did you start doing it more regularly?
So when I turned, so when I want to say when I turned 14, so this is now flash forward a couple years, and at that point, like the from that age 12 to 14, I could probably count on one hand how many times I drank alcohol. Like, it was literally, it wasn't something that I pursued.
Right.
I turned 14, or 14 to 15. So I want to say that's like middle school going into high school. Now I'm with friends that were starting to experiment with like smoking weed. And my progression with drugs happened very rapidly. So I smoked weed for the first time when I was 14. And I got high the first time I smoked weed. I know some people say don't get high the first time they smoked weed. I got high, and I remember
People say they didn't get high the first time they smoked weed.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Man,
Lot of people.
I can still remember
it. Yeah, I think I've still got lasting effects from the first time
it.
I smoked weed. So
We got the
I,
munchies and almost burned my
oh
house down.
yeah,
Literally.
I remember having that instant onset of paranoia because I got to go home and deal with mom. My eyes were bloodshot red. I've permagrinned on the face, right? Just a smile that won't go away. And I'm like, crap, dude, I don't know how I can hide this. And so that's kind of where my drug obsession kind of started. Now I'm experimenting with pills, low grade opiates like the hydrocodone and stuff like that, Loratabs. And now I'm starting to get a sense of this stuff, what this stuff can do for me in terms of the surface stuff, right? Like, now I feel like I'm accepted by a certain group of people. I know I'm having fun, right? So I'm going to parties and hanging out with people. Everybody's doing it. And I felt like I started to find my identity in this, right? And when I was 15, meth was relatively big where I lived. And
still Montana now?
No, now I'm back in Idaho. So my parents were divorced. My dad lived in Montana. Mom lived in Idaho. I'm living with mom.
Okay.
And now obsession of wanting to try different drugs or stronger drugs, or, you know, how does this make you feel? You know, like now that obsession has kind of started, the balls started rolling, right? And so I remember the first time I got invited to smoke meth, and I remember being nervous. It was my friend Devin who had brought it up to me, and he just passed away last year. Rest in peace. Um, I remember telling him, I said, man, like, I mean, like, what does it do to you? Like, are we going to be all right if we do this? He's like, yeah, we should be all right, man. And he hadn't done it either. And so, you know, like, it's the whole kind of, I don't want to say so much peer pressure, more, I think it was more of like a misery loves company type deal. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we did it, and I remember just thinking like, wow, like, yeah, this is all right. And the meth endeavor started pretty heavily, and it was just on the
So
weekends.
that really worked for you, the meth. That was,
Yeah. So
did that hit home better than weed and alcohol, or just different, or was
yeah,
it like, ooh, I found my girlfriend?
yeah. So that was, I want to say that was the hook, line, and sinker in terms of drugs for me. Um, and I think there was an attraction to it for me of the, um, because of the, because it was more extreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found attraction in that because not everybody was doing it, but I was involved with people that were, and so it felt like I had become part of this exclusive club. As crazy as that sounds, and and that's the first time that I can say um, I felt addiction, right? Like truly, like if I didn't have it, I wanted it. What do I need to
Mm-hmm.
do to get it? Um, you know, whether it was stealing money, or at that point, it wasn't so much stealing. It was more, I was still able to kind of manipulate money from family and friends, right? But for the first time in my life, I had now put a substance in my body that that controlled me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you're
and
16 now?
I'm 15,
15, okay.
15, and I had and then this is where it progressed for me. So I had a neighbor that lived about 3 or 4 houses down from where I lived at the time, and he sold meth, and he was about a year or two older than me, and so me and my friends are kind of starting to get into the whole getting more than just personal use. You know, now we're getting enough to kind of sell it to our other friends and close friends, right? And I'm over at his house one day, and him and his girlfriend are there, and I'm sitting in his bedroom, and I'll never forget this day. It's burned in my head. Um, I'm sitting on his bed, and I'm looking down the hallway into the bathroom, and they're shooting up,
Mm-hmm.
and I had never shot up before. I'm still a young, wide-eyed kid, right? And his girlfriend comes back in the room, and I'm like, "What is that like?" You know, because I'm curious. And she was like, "Well, it's better than smoking it." And I was like, "Well, would I be all right if I did that?" Like that was my question, right? I still had
Mm-hmm.
some concern and caution in my heart for certain things, right? Because I didn't want to die, you know. I just wanted to have fun, um, and I was like, "Well, I've never done it. I don't know how to do it." And this his girlfriend, her name was Cassie. She says, "Well, I can do it for you." And I was like, "Well, yeah." And so I'm 15, probably close to being 16. I just remember being 15 for sure, and I'd only smoked meth for several months before I shot up. Um, and so I do it, and this changed the trajectory of my entire life that day for the next 20 years.
Wow.
I did it, and I remember a feeling of just I was completely elated. I felt like somebody had just injected me with the shot of life, right? Um, I felt I had never felt more alive. Um, and one of the other things I liked about it a lot is I quickly realized that I could shoot up a little bit of meth and I would be high for 15 hours, right? Rather than smoking on a pipe every 30 minutes. Um, and that was the other attractive part to me, right? Was took less to get higher, but lasted longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how my brain computed it. And that changed things for me for the next few years.
So how was high school then after you had that aha moment?
So high school, I played sports. I played sports all the way through middle school into high school. And the sports started to die off. After I started doing that, I started to surround myself. I started to slowly break away from my teammates. And I played basketball and football, and I slowly distanced myself from what we would consider the healthy people, right? The people weren't doing that. Probably at most they were drinking on the weekends, like most high school kids, right? And then I slowly gravitated towards people that were getting high. I managed to play sports until I was about 17. I would go on and off of these benders, but eventually it caught up to me. I would go from just doing the weekends and maybe even 2 or 3 weeks without using, and then it was just like a magnet. It would just suck me right back in.
Mainly, or what are you using anything, drinking a lot, or just mainly meth?
It was mainly just meth and smoking weed. And I had a profound love for benzos and opiates as well, but those seemed like a little harder to come by, whereas the was just easier to get, especially with my neighbor having it all the time. And I remember there was times where I would go like, I don't know, a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden it was just like it was like somebody was inside my head, and I would just get this instant like, I want to get high, like, and I would just a complete disregard for whatever I had going on, with family or a game coming up or practice. That's where I started to slip up, as I started missing practices, and obviously that doesn't go over well. And then finally I was just like, I had this decision. I was like, I don't even want this, which is crazy because sports were my passion, and they still are. And I was willing to let go of my passion. That's something that I loved so much and was so involved with, for this substance that I felt like could do much more for me.
If you don't mind, I know you're passionate about sports. Can you show your tat on your?
Yeah. Oh, my Nike check. Yeah.
Mike's got
Yeah.
the swoosh on his neck.
Yeah.
He's kind of into sports.
Yeah. I'm all in, man. I'm all in. And so,
So my point there is you went against something that was really important to you. You felt you found something more important.
yeah. And it's crazy because it's almost like I had no, so somebody could lay out the facts, right, of the decisions I was making and lay them out in front of my face, but it's almost like I would see them differently even if they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I wanted to, or not because I believed in something different, but it was just like the way I perceived it is, well, I mean, to be quite frank, I think I just believed that I had control over it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I believed that I could do this. This is what made me happy in terms of drugs, right? I could do the drugs and I can still have my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just truly believed that, that I could make it work somehow, some way.
Yeah. The sad thing I think is, and what I found in my life, and then man, and pretty much everybody I've known, is it steals our dreams.
Yeah.
Like we get romanced by it, and it fills some kind of hole, whether it's depression or anxiety or just being a 15 or 18-year-old kid or just life or whatever it is. You know, we've all got, I think every mortal's got some mental health issues. I don't think there's anybody unaffected. And you just, all those things you dreamed about when you were a kid just are like secondary,
Yeah.
because it's just like, okay, this is my primary now.
Yeah.
And if my primary doesn't go along with my secondary's gone.
Yeah. And it's wild because it doesn't make sense, right? Like, now that I'm in recovery and I look back on that stuff, like I'm just like it blows my mind that stuff is that powerful, you know, because at the time I had no idea. Obviously people around me would tell me, right? But I believed that I could control it.
So you get out of high school, and when's the first time you've had a consequence for using? When was the first time
So
something bad, or not, you know, just a consequence?
yeah, so the first time I had a consequence, I was I was I was 16. Um, Me and my friends robbed. Um, we robbed this house. Long story short, we knew these people were going out of town. It was my girlfriend at the time's friend's family, and so we knew they were out of town.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well, hey, we can break into this house. We can take whatever, sell it, get money, and and basically buy drugs, right? And so we break into this house. We steal some TVs, jewelry, uh, a massive coin collection, and we pawn most of it, sell some of it, trade some of it, whatever. Uh, Long story short, we got caught, um, and I went to jail, for 30 days, juvenile jail or juvenile corrections facility or whatever in Idaho Falls, for 30 days. Um, that was the first time that I'd ever been to jail. That was the first time that I remember thinking, I've got to do something different. I don't want this. The juvenile jail sucked because it was like 23 hours a day locked down in a cell. Uh, they would time your showers. So you go to showers, have your shower, and they would time it like 7 minutes. You had like 7 minutes to shower. That was the first time I'd ever been in an institution that told me how I was to live. And I remember my mom being devastated and heartbroken. And she knew I was starting to struggle with drugs at this point in my life because it showed physically, it showed in my behaviors and my emotions, and uh, you know, anger and hostile and extreme highs and extreme lows. She just tried to do her best as a single mother, and I just kind of steamrolled her.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, deal with it or don't, and that was kind of my attitude then. And I remember having this thought when I was in that jail, of saying, all right, I got to do something different. This isn't going to work. But more importantly, I remember my thought process was more like that of, I have to do this differently. It wasn't so much I've got to stop. I
Mhm.
think like a normal person would be. It was more like, okay, so I can't do that again, or if I do that again, I have to do it like this.
Figure out a way to not get caught.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There really wasn't a whole lot of like feelings of change. It was more like feelings of doing something different but the same. And
Mhm.
and again, that thought process uh, altered altered my life for a long time. And yeah, so that was the first time I'd been to jail. Um, and so I got out of jail, um, and things were good for a minute. But again, now I've got this hook, line, and sinker for methamphetamine, and all my friends that I hang out with do it. The girls I hang out with do it, and so it didn't take long before I fell right back into that norm. Um, at this point, at this point, um, now this goes on for kind of go on for a year, and I'm starting to get pretty heavy into the meth. It's not just weekends now. It's like 4 or 5 days out of the week, and then sleep for two
Mhm.
two straight days, right? So my mom calls my dad, and she's voicing a concern to him that I'm not doing well, that I look like a skeleton with skin wrapped around it. Um, I'm hardly home. I'm leaving for 3 or 4 days at a time, and then just come back to the house to sleep and change clothes. So it's pretty obvious, right?
Right.
Um, and at this point, I'm not even really. I'm far beyond the point of hiding it. Um, the most thing I would try to do would be to hide track marks. You know what I mean? But that was the extent of it. And my mom calls my dad and says, "You need to come down here." Um, so my dad comes down here, and a long story short, my parents end up remarrying, which was actually for the third time. Um, and my dad comes down to Idaho. At this point now, he's living back east. He's living back east in Virginia. So he
Okay.
flies over to Idaho to check on me, and really he was flying back to Idaho to help my mom move back east with him. And so it was just kind of like a bonus deal coming to check on me as well. And I was able to kind of manipulate the situation. Like, I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave. Like, I'm about ready to graduate high school. All my friends are here. So the question was like, okay, well, where are you going to live? Like, and I was like, well, I can move in with my buddy. He's clean, which was a lie, right? Obviously. Um, and so I stay here, and both of my parents move back east. And I was able to uh, I was able to kind of keep the car on the road for about 9 months. Um, After about 9 months, um, I called my dad, and I said, "Hey, I need out of here. This isn't working." Um, I think for the first time in my addiction, I finally felt like I had hit a wall, and I had no more options. Right, the couches had run up, the money had run out. I'd exhausted all resources that I had at 17 years old, which weren't many. I wasn't working, barely hanging on to school. And so I moved back east at 17, almost 18. And when I moved back east, that is where I believe my addiction really changed.
In what way?
I was introduced to heroin. And so at this point, right, like, so I moved back east, and this is just a classic example of and I know you've heard that saying, right? No matter where you go, there you are, right?
Yeah.
I didn't understand that, right? Like, I thought I could run away from the problem, which at that point was meth and certain people and places, right? I was like, I can run away from that 2,000 miles to the East Coast where I don't know anybody. And I'll be all right. Problem is the problem was me. And so I get back east and I start working this job at a Dollar General. And then I meet this guy named Jason, who becomes essentially my first friend in Virginia. And then that kind of opened up the realm of meeting people, and he smoked weed, so we'd smoke weed on our breaks and stuff. And then I go over to one of his friends' house, like, hey, you want to come hang out and with me over to these guys' house? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I go over there, and they're all doing coke and stuff like that. And so I start snorting coke and drinking, and now I've just met a new group of friends, right? People that I could hang out with. Now I wasn't alone. We had this common bond of we get high and drink and have fun, right? And I'm meeting girls and stuff like that. And so this goes on for, and no meth. There was no meth out there. And so I think there was a certain part of it in my mind. I was like, hey, I'm not doing meth. Like, great, that's a victory. But I was doing other things. And so I end up, so maybe several months go by, and I end up meeting somebody, and he's doing heroin. And I was already privy to the needle, right? That wasn't new to me, although I hadn't shot anything up in almost a year. And again, my initial question was like, okay, well, how much do I do? Like, and I don't, like, am I gonna be okay? Okay, I'm not trying to overdose or nothing like that. And it was like, yeah, I know, you'll be fine. Just do this much. And so I do it. And I remember that first time I did heroin, it was like I had found the cheat code to life. I was like, this is it. This is what I've been searching for my entire life. And I finally found it. And that controlled me for 15 years. Heroin was my daily thing. And there was a point in time too, when I first started doing heroin where, and this is how deceptive it is, right? Is I was shooting up heroin for probably several months, and my family didn't know. I was working a job for a nuclear industry, inspecting welds that my dad got me. So I'd go to these nuclear power plants and travel all over the country and the world. And I would just get clean in between these jobs, because I'd have to get a badge at these jobs and test and all that type of stuff to get clearance. And I would just go through the withdrawals. I'd usually drink to combat the withdrawals, and I wouldn't use any heroin. I'd use Suboxone, and I wouldn't use any heroin for 4 to 6 weeks, and then I would fly home and right back to it. But nobody knew for several months that I was using heroin, because I was sleeping, right? I was eating. Um, I and so I felt like I had the wool pulled over the world's eyes, um, and that carried on until people that were close to me started to kind of ask questions. It's like, where are you going? What are you doing? There's times I'm nodding out, or my eyes are so pinned that you can't even see the pupils, and so I ended up doing something that I that I regret deeply. I I knew that if the people around me did heroin as well, then they could pay for it. And so, in my twisted way of thinking, um, the people around me that weren't doing heroin, I essentially got them all kind of hooked on heroin, and then they would have to rely on me to get it. Um, and and I eventually lost that job, inspecting welds, and I remember being 21 years old, and I made like $85,000 in 1 year,
Wow.
which is great money, right? And so I felt like I was on top of the world. I was also in college, and I remember being in the parking lot one day shooting heroin, getting ready to go to class, and I remember thinking, like, I was like, here I am, I'm a heroin addict, but I'm pulling good grades in college. I have a great job. So where's the problem at? And that's what my disease, that's how my disease had me. Like, my disease had me so cornered and so so deceived that I didn't see it as a problem, because I was doing these things, right? I was getting this validation from coworkers and family, like, hey, you're doing good, like, I have money. Um, but the bottom on all that fell out pretty rapidly. Um, I think I managed to keep that job for about 2 years, and in that 2 years, I progressed rapidly. I was getting level 2 and level 3 certifications on different types of weld inspection. But I was shooting heroin in the bathroom, 5, 6, 7 times a day. Um, I eventually got called to go on this emergency job in Michigan. They were fueling up the company jet. They called me. I tried to do everything I could to get out of it. Because now I'm dirty, right? I've been smoking weed and doing heroin because I just gotten off my last job for the summer, so I thought I was good for a few months. Tried to do everything I could to do to get out of it. Went and bought some detox drink at a head shop, thinking that would mask my urine, because I couldn't ask my coworker for clean pee, right, without it looking suspicious. Um, I go to this job, take the detox drink, end up failing my UA, and lost that job. And that created a wedge between me and my dad, because he had got me that job, and so it really started the divide between me and my father. Um, and at that point, I felt like I had nothing else to lose, and so I just fully enthralled myself in being a heroin addict. Worked a couple other mediocre jobs at best, but again, all that money that I had, uh, I would just put into my arm, uh, with no regard to anything else, right? And that carried on for a long time.
Tell me what happened. What got you into recovery?
So I So recovery, I moved back here in 2011, back to Idaho from the East Coast again. It was the geographical change that I thought would save my life, right? So I got to get away from heroin, and I came back here and kept doing it. I ended up getting a Drunken Public on the 4th of July that year, 2011, which eventually snowballed into prison. I ended up going to prison for several years for drug charges. And I was in prison this last time for 4 years, got out and was high 2 hours later. And that was after almost 4 years of not using. So more evidence for me that until I worked on the problem wasn't going to go away. It didn't matter how long I didn't use for. I ended up getting out of prison in 2020. I went on a bender that lasted 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, I caught more felony drug charges. And before I caught those charges, I knew I needed help. And so my sister actually called the ranch and talked with Forrest and said, "Hey, my brother needs help." And she gave me the information. I called Forrest and he said, "Okay, there's about a 30-day wait. I need you to call me every day so that I know you really want this and we'll get you in here." I was like, sweet. In those 30 days is when I caught more felony drug charges and went to jail. I got bailed out. And I remember I was in a hotel and I ended up overdosing on fentanyl that night. Paramedics came, revived me. Right when the paramedics left, the type of addict I am, right when the paramedics left, I instantly start pulling back some meth to shoot up meth. And literally, right, this is why I believe God works through other people for us. My phone rings and I look down at my phone as I'm getting ready to do this, and it's Forrest. I answer it and he's like, "Hey buddy, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Dude, not good." I was like, "It's all bad." It's like, "I just overdosed. I'm currently shooting up meth. I'm in a hotel. I got to check out in 45 minutes. I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm going to do. Zero hope." He's like, "Okay, well, hang on. I'm going to call you right back." So he hangs up the phone and he calls me back about 15 minutes later. And he's like, "Hey, can you be here on Sunday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I can make it there on Sunday." And this was like on a Thursday or a Friday. And so I end up getting to the ranch on Sunday by the grace of God. Completely beaten down, spiritually broken. I couldn't tell if I was coming or going. All I knew is I needed something different. Mm-hmm. And I walked through the door of Ren'ais'sance Ranch, which ultimately started the change in my life. And that was July 31st of 2022. So awesome. Almost 2 years.
2 years.
Coming up on 2 years, yep.
That's pretty amazing, dude. So July 21st is your sobriety date?
No, so I got to the ranch July 31st, but my sobriety date August 1st.
August 1st, okay, good.
August 2022, yeah. So about almost 2 years.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, H.
So tell me what it was like in treatment? I mean, what was your first month like there?
So my first month was rocky at best. When I journal a lot, I write a lot, and I I oftentimes I'll look back at I wrote day one, which would have been July 31st of 2022, and it was a short paragraph. It looked like a fifth grader wrote it in English, just real scribbly, and you could barely read it. But I had mentioned that I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't know where I was at or what I was doing. And then I wrapped it up with just like, God, please help me. I I struggled, right? So I was detoxing pretty heavily, coming off of Xanax and fentanyl, meth. I was hurting, and I, I managed to kind of push through that. But at one point, I'd made a phone call to leave. I left group and made a phone call to leave and said, "Hey, I'm ready to leave. I'll be here." And then I went back downstairs and to group, and I remember having this thought of it was like this voice in my head that said, "You're trying to run back to the exact place that you needed to run from."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? That's right. And so I went back upstairs and canceled that ride, and that turned out to be one of the best decisions I've made to this point. And then there's this saying, right? The only thing you have to change is everything.
Mm-hmm.
That just clicked in my head one day, right? And I was like, you know what? I do. I need to change everything. I need to cut these people from my life. I need to really start working on myself and surrendering everything, because
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of things that I wanted to keep, things that I believed served me. Some of those things helped me survive through my addiction, but I had finally gotten to a place where I started to realize that I didn't need those things to survive anymore.
Interestingly enough, most of our character defects are characteristics that keep us safe on earth that we take to excess. So like I've got to eat food, but I don't have to, eat too much food. I've got to make money, but do I need to be greedy? Like I gotta, there are things that God gave us to keep us safe or thriving on earth, and most mortals, and especially people in addiction, kind of we take it over the line of excess.
Yeah,
Like you said, I wanted, whatever it was, 5 Legos or whatever toy you had. Like one's not enough, right? I want
oh,
six. I
yeah,
just want one more than you.
yeah,
That's the envy side, right? So
yeah. If one's good, two is better.
yeah.
And I and balance, it's a balance. There's been zero balance in my life, and when I got into recovery, I started to see the importance in balance, right? My emotional, my spiritual, my physical, my mental. If any of those pies on a pie chart are too big, that means I'm lacking in one of the other ones. And so, like, as I went through residential, I was ready. My willingness to want something different was there. Because I tried, right. So from the ages of 15 to 37, I tried it my way. I tried to different combinations of different drugs, and maybe I can just do this and not that, or maybe I can just take these prescriptions and not that. Maybe I can just smoke weed. Maybe I can just drink. And none of it worked. None of it's worked out for me. Um, and if it had, then I would still be doing it. And so I finally started to look at my life and look at the facts, not just the stuff that I wanted to look at or that I was comfortable with looking at, but some of the stuff that hurt and made me
Mhm.
uncomfortable, and the things that I didn't want to believe. as facts. And when
Mhm.
I really started to do that, certain things started to make sense. Um, and
So
and
did
so
you go to sober living in aftercare? I mean, in
yeah,
outpatient?
yep. I had this game plan of how I was going to do. I knew from the beginning that I needed to do 10 months. That was the only way that this was going to end well for me, was I needed to do 10 months. And so I committed to sober living. I went to PHP, and then I started doing skills work. And then I was like, well, so I didn't have a car, didn't have a phone, didn't have anything. And so the Bob, the Band of Brothers construction company, was there, and I got in with those guys because I knew those guys were running programs, and I knew how to do some construction work. And so I started working with those guys and just living recovery, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, we would have meetings, we would talk recovery, we would go to meetings together, we would check in with each other. And now for the first time in my life, I'm getting the same acceptance from a healthy group of people that I used to crave from
Right.
people using drugs, right? And that felt good because it didn't just fill that void, it removed it
Yeah.
for me. And
So what are you doing now?
so now I work for the Ren'ais'sance Ranch. I am a house manager / recovery coach. I get to show up every day and kind of help these guys walk through some of those emotions and feelings that are crippling in the early days of recovery, right? And then I get to do recovery coaching for guys that are in the IOP program, which is rewarding on a whole different level. I get to kind of help get them in the right direction, right? Get a sponsor and work steps.
Mhm.
Sure, they've got dailies in place.
Well, speaking of dailies, what do you do every day to stay sober? What are your dailies? You mind sharing those with the guys?
Yeah, so my dailies consist of, in the mornings, I like to read. I choose to read like a faith-based devotional, like a daily devotional,
Mhm.
and then I'll also read some scriptures. Um, I pray. So it goes like this. I make my coffee. I sit down. I read my faith-based devotional. Then I pray, and then I'll read my scriptures. And then from there, I'll usually read like um, just for today or daily meditation, to just kind of, and for me, what that does is that kind of gets my brain firing in
Mhm.
recovery, something positive, right? Um, and then at night, I end every night with prayer. I have a couple different types of literature that I kind of like to filter out and read, and then I also write. I write my journal.
Okay.
Um, those are my dailies, and then I go to the gym every day as well. But those are my that kind of keeps me balanced. That's the biggest part, and the other big part of my recovery today is my work with my sponsees. I have a couple sponsees that I'm taking through the steps. Um, I really grabbed hard onto that whole uh, you can only keep what you have by giving it away, and so I know how the steps have changed my life.
Mhm.
uh, it only makes sense to give it away, and I just started going through the steps again with my sponsor. So I'm going through step 2 again right now. Well, done with step 2, going on to step 3. um,
Awesome.
so yeah, that's
A lot of service work, huh?
a lot of service work, man. And that's the key for me, right? Is like I realize now how self-centered the disease of addiction is, and I've taken my entire life, and so why not start to give back, right?
Yeah.
And that's what does it for me. I truly believe that service is the answer. So
Yeah. So I'm gonna, with your permission, I'm gonna surprise you with something.
yeah,
I
let's
guess
do
you
it.
can't give me your permission to let you know. I as you've been talking, I Googled your name in Idaho. Can I show a picture of your mugshot?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's so different from what you look like. Do you
Oh,
mind?
oh yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. um, and really, if it's you're not cool, I'm cool not to show it.
No,
But
hey, oh,
okay,
all
okay,
exclusive, man.
okay. Let me see if I can find it. I hope this records.
Yeah. So that was, yeah, that was my last. That was my last arrest in July of 22.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now I want to surprise you with something else.
yeah,
I went down from there
yeah.
and looked at all the comments.
Mhm.
Why give this guy a plea agreement? He can serve out the maximum in jail. Perhaps Nike should pay for his keep.
Yeah, the community
I'll
wasn't
tell
happy.
you right now, most Idahoans have the necessary means. I mean, none of these were good.
No,
This is people 2 years ago saying, throw this dude back in jail. I'm tired of giving people second chances. And
yeah,
just so you know, I posted on there and I said, just an FYI update. Mike has been clean and sober for almost 2 years and is giving back to those who suffer from addiction. No one is beyond the arms of grace and mercy. So
Hey,
it just watching, looking at that picture, and now looking at you, dude. What a miracle! What a God of miracles that we worship. You
yeah,
know, the whoever your God is, in the end, it's all going to be the same thing. But all of you out there, whether you're Buddhist or Muslim or Catholic or LDS or whatever you are, you
mhm.
know, I believe in miracles, and I believe our God is behind all of them.
Amen.
And looking at that mugshot, and now looking at you, I have the opportunity to be out there once a month, and I watch Mike in person dealing with guys and staffing things. And if you'd have shown me that picture of him, you know, from 2 years ago, you know, strung out, um, on his last leg, probably ready to die, probably suicidal.
Yeah,
And if you'd have given him in front of 12 people that said, yeah, put him away, and one judge, and I believe God probably nudged him and said, hey, this guy needs another chance. This guy needs another shot.
absolutely.
And look what happened, dude.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm I've got to bounce because I forgot my daughter's on an LDS mission up in Montana, and today's
Okay.
her P day, and she's buzzing in to call me, and I get to talk to her like once a week. But
Awesome.
dude, I'm so grateful that you came on, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to share this story. And I've been around this business a while. I've been around recovery for a while, and Mike's just one of those dudes. And fortunately, there's so much light behind you right now, literally, but there's so much light that comes out of Mike when he's around the guys and and the experiences that you've had, um, not only drugs and alcohol, but with jail and prison, gives you that empathy that a lot of people can't have. Gives you that ability to look at a guy and say, "Look, man, I know what it's like to sit in a cell. I know what it's like to hear those doors freaking shut behind you and know you're not coming out for a minute. I know what it's like to be in there where the code is I'm not going to narc, and then I get out and you're telling me I've got to be rigorously honest with people, and like, you know, like it's opposite, you know, that stuff that maybe kept you safe, incarcerated, kills you as an addict
Yeah.
outside. So I've only known you a short time, and I don't see you much, dude. But you're just such a good man. You've got that light of God behind you, and recovery and gratitude, and just like there's a peace about you, a serenity about you that I think is very attractive to people you work with and people in the rooms. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for what you're doing for the men, not just at the ranch, but for the people out in the rooms, and what you're doing in your community. And thank goodness for grace and mercy. or maybe you'd still be sitting in some stupid jail cell and be waiting to get out so you could go get loaded again instead
Yeah.
of being sober.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, H, and I hope that it helps. And yeah, amen, man. God at the front of everything.
Amen, buddy. Well, I sure love you, bud.
Yeah, I love you too, man.
Take it easy, Mike.
Yeah, you too. Bye.